Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Erik Skopil on the show with me. I'm Matt Prehm. Another basketball-heavy focused show because, look, commitments are coming in. Both the men and the women have landed verbal commitments from the transfer portal. We're going to break all of those down. We talked about it last time on the show when we did one that was a heavy basketball men's side that we would dive into the women's side because we anticipated things happening. And Erik, yes, there has been movement. There has been positive movement. The Ducks have added multiple verbal commitments from the transfer portal. Let's start with maybe the bigger name player, Mia Jacobs, who has landed from Fresno State. What is Oregon getting? How did this happen? What's going to be her impact with this program?
Yeah, this was the big one so far. Two in hand. We're recording this at a time where I was told there's a third, but I don't know if that name is coming out by the time we post this. So we're just being a little careful here. So just keep that notice that this is kind of being recorded around a time where it's possible a third name jumps in here. But Jacobs is undoubtedly like the bigger of the two names we know right now. And this is a prospect who's kind of unheralded out of high school, coming over from Australia, went to LaSalle for a year. Productive year, was all freshman there, transferred to the West Coast to Fresno State, and was just a standout for the Bulldogs for 2 years. This last year, second in the conference in scoring, second in the conference in rebounding, shot 38% from three on over 5 per game as a 6'2" kind of stretch power forward. This is a really big get. I mean, this is a senior who comes in, and I spoke with her. I've got quotes and a story up over on duckterritor.com if you want to go check that out. But like, she wants to be a WNBA player. Kelly Graves thinks that she has the ability to do that, but this year is critical for her to achieve that. And, we'll kind of see what the next offseason looks like, I guess, in terms of development there. But I think you have to look at her and say, like, this is a cornerstone for this program. This is a team that when they entered the portal, first off, retaining all 9 possible returners was key. But the fact that you can add a player like this is integral because you needed that kind of go-to veteran senior leadership player. Obviously, this isn't the same position as a Deja Kelly. I think they're going to try to get a guard or two or some perimeter players that maybe have some of those intangibles. That could be something coming down the pike. But with this particular addition, this is somebody who could be your leading scorer, who could be a focal point of an offense. We'll see how it translates. Kind of always hard to tell from Mountain West up to the Big Ten, but certainly a player you feel really excited about who checks boxes, can score, can rebound, can kind of initiate offense, and can really shoot the ball from three, which is something that Oregon has kind of lacked. Let's be honest, the last couple of years has not been a strength. So really big get. I think Oregon was in against some pretty big teams, and this is certainly one you have to be pretty excited about.
Yeah, this is an Aussie player, comes from Perth, Western Australia. Will be fun to have the Aussie flair to the roster. And I think my less informed opinion of looking at her and the game that she'll bring to Eugene is you look at her numbers across the board at LaSalle as a freshman and then as a sophomore at Fresno State and then as a junior at Fresno State. Her shooting numbers have all that's a jump from LaSalle to the Mountain West Conference. Now she's a second year in the Mountain West Conference of being a bigger focal point. Everyone's got a year of scouting report on her, better idea of what she can do. Her percentage has never dipped. What she did at LaSalle, like more minutes, more opportunities the following year. So her numbers went up, but her shooting percentages basically stayed the same. Her 3-point percentage actually improved with more attempts from her freshman year to her sophomore year. That's a real positive sign that you want to see a player can adapt to the increase in talent. And then the junior year from her sophomore year, her numbers, her shooting percentages were all up from where they were the year before. And that's with the understanding that she's playing more minutes. She's getting more usage. She's shooting more attempts. She's shooting more threes. She's shooting more free throws. More focus is on her because of the whole year in the system and in the league, and everyone's going to know what she can do. That's a real good sign. Now, going from the Mountain West Conference, you'll know more about this than I would, to the Big Ten. It's probably going to be a pretty big jump, probably a bigger jump from her freshman year and what I think is the Atlantic 10. I think that's where LaSalle is in.
Yep.
Jumping to the Mountain West, it's not as big of a jump. Mountain West to the Big Ten is. So you look at it and you probably say, like, hey, like, can she replicate 60, 70% of her averages across the board. And if she can, like, you're still getting a really good player. And I think I said this to you right away when you told me that she was going to commit, that this feels like Oregon's Aaron Boley
Mhm.
of the Final Four year and those great years that they had. A 6'2" forward that can handle the ball, can shoot the ball, can shoot threes, and can give you some rebounding. She's probably a better rebounder, to be honest, than Aaron Boley was.
Yeah, and I think there's more offensive versatility here. Probably not quite the elite 3-point shooter. Like
Sure.
Boley could heat up and hit 8 in a game. That happened a couple times, and of course the spacing on those teams was incredible. She's getting basically wide open threes in the corner with Sabrina or Satu driving or Ruthie at the block. So, but Jacobs, I think this is one of the things we talked about in the interview up on the site is that, like, at Fresno State, a lot of the time, like, the best shot in a possession was like her in double coverage, just trying to get it up and over somebody, in the mid range or the post. Like, those aren't the problems she's probably going to likely deal with at Oregon. And one thing that I think really stood out from my conversation with her and then my conversation with Avery Kane, the other commitment that is public, is just the change of how they're going to be playing pace wise in terms of getting up and down the court. Like, they really stood out to me talking to both of them of, like, Oregon last year played a style. I don't think Kelly said this publicly, but I don't know if this is how he wants to coach basketball. Where it's not that he doesn't want to have good defensive teams, but they average about 68 points per game. Like, the best stretch of their season, they were averaging, in the 50s. They're playing great defensive basketball. Don't take anything away from that. You find ways to win, and this team was able to do it. But what have we seen from Oregon when they've been at their best? And I guess when they kind of announced themselves on the scene about a decade ago with Sabrina was just high pace, get up and down the court. And I think that's what they want to do. And that's what a player like Jacobs really fits is she could be like a small ball 5 at times where she's like your only big quote unquote. And she's only 6'2". So this isn't a massive player by any means, but she gives you the ability to stretch the ball on the perimeter. She can get out in transition and put the ball on the floor and finish. So I think Oregon is making a concerted effort in the players I've spoken to play faster, to kind of get back to playing a certain style of play that is reminiscent of when they were at their highest level. And this is a nice kind of collection of players so far that I think are more fit to play that way. I don't expect to see like a 6'8" Filipina Che added. Like, they're not going to be going after quote unquote like those big traditional bigs that they have had the last several years with her and Sedona and some of the others. I think they want to get out and run a little bit more. And Jacobs, I think, certainly is the kind of big player that you would target and try to build around, with that aim being, hey, we're kind of try to kind of score and be a little bit different in terms of our approach. So clear indication, I think, with that addition, and certainly with Avery Kane, who we can now talk about if you'd like.
I don't want to say like, hey, let's automatically pencil him in or pencil her in and call her a starter, but she's the odds-on favorite, right, for the power forward spot. Like, she's gonna be the probably the front runner here.
Yeah, I think so. There's some younger players in the roster who I like Ahisa Tute, the gal from Luxembourg, who played a little bit as a freshman last year, showed a lot of promise. I think that's a player they want to build around. But from an experience perspective, this is somebody who's had it and done it, and again, not at this level, but has been really, really productive. And Fresno State wasn't an elite team last year. I think they finished kind of middle of the Mountain West, but they were really competitive in the conference tournament. They played in the postseason. Jacobs I was looking at this earlier. This is pretty impressive. She had 4 30-point double-doubles last year. Those are, there's a couple of games where she scored like 35 points and grabbed like 14 rebounds. Like, that's impressive stuff. And so that's the type of player you're adding with that kind of a pedigree. So I think you expect she comes in and fills that role. Now, it's probably maybe a good thing if there's enough competition on this roster where she isn't like the clear go-to power forward, and she is pushed and challenged by a younger player. But I think right now that's sort of my expectation, at least, is that she's going to be the starting power forward, and depending on kind of how things develop, could be one of the top overall offensive players on this team.
And she's correct. She's just got 1 year of eligibility left. There's no COVID year. There's no redshirt year she could get back. No JUCO year. She's just a 1-for-1 player for Oregon.
Matt, I had to ask her that question the exact same way, and to be basically apologetic of like, I hate to ask. I know you've played 3 years of college basketball. In a logical, reasoned world, that would mean you have one left for 4 years. And she said, yeah, that's the case. But you have to ask now, because like you said, it could be a COVID year. There could be some weird injury thing that happened or some hardship. But no, as far as I can tell, this is a one and done, kind of in the same vein of a Deja or a Nani, where bring her in for a year. Hopefully she kind of elevates the program as one of your key veteran players, and then develop around her with some younger ones.
Yeah, 96 career games, 81 career starts to her name. She's averaged 14 points over her last 3 seasons of college basketball, coming off a year in which she's a double-double, 18 points, 10 rebounds, 40% from the field. And she will be a big asset for the women's basketball program. She will be a big help. And it's a big get. Probably one of the more productive forwards at the mid-major level that was in the portal this season, if not just everywhere. It's a big get. Now, another addition for the women here is a school that's from California and a school that's familiar to Oregon as well. Former 5-star recruit guard Avery Kane has transferred from the University of Oregon from UCLA to the U of O. And sounds like, Eric, you can give us some more of a backstory here. Well, she maybe didn't play a ton. Obviously, she was a 5-star. She's played on the number 1 team in the country. That speaks volumes. And there's a past relationship here with Oregon that played a big factor here.
Yeah, I asked her why Oregon. It was pretty much, I really have a strong connection and relationship with Kelly Graves, who recruited her aggressively out of high school. Again, another one of those SoCal kids. It's really hard sometimes to beat a school like UCLA, who's kind of had the momentum that they've had on the recruiting trail for someone in their backyard. But I think it's a really big get. Talking to people around the program, like this was, that they basically are all like, you see the production and you can poo it, but this is like a big time talent. And if you go watch kind of the high school highlights that are on YouTube, if you want, you can go check it out and just see why this is still an enticing prospect. Like, I'm not going to say this is the same level of Jacobs, because Jacobs is the proven player, but like if you're just comparing side by side kind of the traits, like Kane, you can see where the upside is there, and maybe she could be ultimately like a bigger contributor over a 3-year span from what Jacobs is in a 1 year. So 6'1", lefty, perimeter player, really good shot, can shoot it to 3, shows great, I think, consistency from her form. Somebody who can get out and run and handle the ball. I think her length stands out, and just kind of what you see there, aggressive and known to be like a high-end defensive player. I think in a lot of ways, this is very similar to Sophia Bell. The Sophia and her actually had about the exact same recruiting ranking, about 1 year apart. Both are 6'1", 6'2" kind of perimeter players who are primarily shooters and who are high-end defensive players. I do think, in just kind of watching a little bit, that there's a chance Kane ends up being a lot more impactful off the dribble than what we've seen from Sophia, who's almost exclusively been just like a catch and shoot 3-and-D player. But right now, she enters a situation where she's going to be competing with a lot of players that have kind of similar traits. I think Sophia being one of the primary ones for minutes. And she played 155 minutes last year at UCLA. Yeah, she played 18 games. Not a lot. Didn't see the court a lot. As Matt said, this was the best team in the country for parts of the season. A team that, like, literally, as I wrote in the story, last Friday, she lost she was with UCLA. They lost in the Final Four. This Friday, she's transferred to Oregon. Like, that's how quickly this is all gone. But she played on a big time team last year, and that, I think, obviously gets in the way of opportunity for her. And she was honest about that, of like, hey, like, it was a disappointing season. I lost some confidence. It was hard. Like, I was, one of the best players in the state of California for the last 4 years as a high school player. And then I go to UCLA for a year, and I'm not even really able to get on the court regularly. I mean, she if you look through her game log, it was kind of like a game here, a game there, then 4 games where she didn't really get in. And, if the games were competitive, she wasn't involved. So, she's got a chip on her shoulder, I think. This is a player you bet on. I've seen people kind of be skeptical or questioning the move just because of the lack of production, but kind of like the same conversation we had earlier about Devin Pryor on the men's side. Like, don't just focus on the stat line. There's oftentimes a lot more context to it. And in this case, this is a player who a year ago was a 5-star recruit, the 26th best player in the country, according to ESPN. She didn't just forget how to play basketball. Maybe the year didn't go great, but I don't think this is a Priscilla Williams situation, who was that big time 5-star transfer they had like 3 years ago, who had bounced around from school to school. And there was kind of a, you talk to people and it was kind of like, well, she's got a lot of talent, but there's some kind of stuff in the way that gets from her to being the type of player that she could maybe be. You don't get any of that with Avery, and having spoken to her on the phone, like, seems like her head's on straight. Like, this was interesting, Matt. She didn't take any official visits. She did all of her recruitment over the phone because she was focused on her academics. Because she said, in order to transfer to another school, I want to make sure my grades are in a good spot. So, like, says all the right
Student
things.
athlete still is a thing,
apparently, yeah. Don't tell everybody else, especially on the day of Nico Yamalava like opting out of Tennessee practice to try to get more in his NIL budget. I guess there still are student athletes, but yeah, no, I think you should be really excited about this one. And like, worst case, she's like a high end, versatile perimeter player who gives you good reserve minutes and maybe eventually becomes a starting caliber player. And I think, like, best case, she's somebody who can contribute quite a bit right away, and some of that potential gets, she reaches that potential earlier than maybe you expect, because there aren't a lot of players on this roster with higher recruiting billing, and this is certainly somebody that you can look at and say she could come in and be one of the more talented players right away, even if she hasn't really proven it at the college level.
The thing that interests me here is the size. She's 1 inch smaller than Jacobs at 6'2", and yet she's a guard. And this is probably the difference between a mid-major player that goes and far exceeds expectations, and you go out and you recruit what would be considered probably coming out of high school, a player that the W has interest in, the WNBA,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
from an athletic standpoint. And this is where I felt like both the men and the women, but particularly the women, they needed to get back to getting this high level athlete on their roster. That they, when it was the Sabrina years, and then a couple years after that, they had the elite athlete on its roster at every position, essentially. And you knew going in that size wasn't going to be an issue, athleticism wasn't going to be an issue. It was purely, can you execute and do you have the skill? And this is that type of a player where her athleticism is going to come off the charts here. I love the fact that she's a guard and she's 6'1". She's probably going to be kind of similar to Sophia Bell's role, where she can probably play multiple positions. But
two through four probably are available.
Yeah. And that's what you hope. Now, I guess my question to you, Erik, is they bring back a lot of pieces from last year's team. She's another developmental piece. So where does she fit in kind of into the rotation? Because a lot of the players that are coming back are kind of also in the same sphere of tier of developmental, or taking that next step from developmental.
Right. Yeah. And that's important to communicate to listeners who maybe haven't been following. I think obviously most people who are listening to this probably have some stakes and kind of know what's going on. But like, Oregon brings back 9 players, 2 of which were starters last year, 5 of which were kind of like up and comers that I think you have to be excited about. And then I'll be honest, there's 2 others kind of on the backside who didn't really play this last year. And I don't really know if their role is going to change a ton this year. But you look at like a Katie Fiso and an Ari Long and a Sophia Bell, and then I mentioned Atute and Sarah Rambis. Those to me are your kind of 5 developmental players. I mean, Eliza Mevius and Amina Muhammad were your returning starters, but you kind of group Jacobs with the Amina Elisa group of like, hey, these are players that have been quality performers, started some games, come from other conferences and have done good things there. And then you got your developmental group, and those 6 players, along with, they're bringing in a couple of true freshmen, Sarah Barholm from up in the Portland area and Janiyah Williams from Oklahoma. That's a core of 8 players basically that are all, I kind of agree, Matt. Like you're looking at and going, I think there's a lot of upside there. Basically, all of them are highly recruited, and you look at the ESPN rankings and they're highly thought of, but haven't necessarily. There've been maybe signs here and there of things they can do, but like it hasn't necessarily all come together. And I think the bet that Coach Graves and his staff is making this offseason is kind of similar to the bet Dan Lanning is making, of like, let's hope that this development comes together. Like, we've been relying on a lot of upperclassmen, and they're going to do a little bit of that this year. But like, we hope we've got kind of a group that is kind of working together and kind of developing together and taking a step, because ultimately for this to really reach where they hope it can get to, like if they want to make it to the NCAA tournament this year, flat out, like they need big developmental years from Fiso, especially. I think that's like who they think is going to be their point guard for years going forward. Like I've heard, like kind of a Jackson Shellstad, hopefully type of player on the women's side who can play the point, he can be a big shot maker, who can drive and initiate. Like that's the kind of player that they hope they've got there. And then you've got Kane and Long who are and Bell, who are these kind of bigger wings who can play a couple different spots, and all of which are capable of shooting the three. You've got your big girls who we've talked about, and so like you can kind of see the outsides of kind of like what this is going to look like. I guess the skeleton of what this could look like. But yeah, there's a lot of development in place, and Kane is certainly a developmental prospect. Going to be a sophomore, has played like 150 minutes in her career, but one I think you definitely want to bet on. You're on mute, Matt.
Yeah, I was actually responding back and I forgot to take off my mute. We're going to go right into the next one because while we were doing this podcast, Erik was able to confirm that there is actually, yes, a third verbal commitment for the program on the women's side. Another familiar school, Washington State, sharpshooter. You pronounce the name, you know it better than me, but they go to Washington State to find another guard.
She's from Kosovo, so I don't blame Matt for having a hard time. I know the last name is pronounced Tahina because when Tahina Paupau was here, it was very confusing watching the games and hearing Tahina's guarding Tahina Paupau. I believe the first name is Astorea, okay. But I'll need assistance on that one too. This has all happened pretty quickly. This was an interesting one. I was talking to actually our sister side over there, Coug fan, Jamie Vinnick, who's been on the show several times, and just kind of talking about what her game looks like. And he said he reminds her a lot of Elisa Mevius, who's a player Oregon fans like an awful lot, kind of has that European flair, really good, impactful defensive player, can initiate some offense. But Tahina has the ability to shoot the three, I think, at a more consistent level than what we've seen from Mevius. I think she shot like 41% a couple of years ago in pretty high volume for the Cougars. Last year it was down to 37%.
Yeah, she actually shot better than you thought. 43% as a sophomore in 23-24. And then this past season, she shot 36% on 7 attempts. So, look, the more numbers threes you take in a game and you still shoot above 35, like I'm much more impressed by that than a guy that shoots 38% and averages 1.13
sure.
attempts per game.
Yeah. No, and like I think this is, I mentioned it earlier in talking about Jacobs of like you need to have some core veteran pieces, and that's what Tahina is. Another 1-year addition. She'll come in, she'll be a veteran presence. She'll probably battle to start. I think she's going to have an uphill battle to do so with what they're bringing back and with the kind of players that I think they've got developed. That doesn't mean she won't play a role, but I don't know if she's necessarily going to be seen as a superior player to Fiso or Mevius as the primary backcourt. And I think the expectation going into this offseason, at least for people I talked to, was that was kind of where they were starting at. And we'll see. But you look at this and you go like, if she can be a quality 3-point shooter, and that's kind of a trend amongst all three of these additions, big time shooters who can handle the ball a little bit, be defensively impactful, like in 20, 25 minutes per game, maybe that's the sort of package you're looking at. Like, I think you feel really good about that. And so, we'll see in terms of what happens next, Matt, because they only had 4 available scholarships. I know they're continuing to host players. A couple of the players that I've heard names of are players that Oregon fans would be really excited if it works out. But we will see how that goes. I'll just say, like, the group that they put together is definitely intriguing. It's going to be, again, betting on playing a different style, betting on players that haven't necessarily done it here. Do they get back to the place that they were a year ago where they're in the tournament? That's certainly the aim. In fact, I was talking to Mia Jacobs about this, and she said, like, I think it was Ari Long who told her, we haven't stopped practicing. Like, we've just gone go, go, go since we lost to Duke. Like, it was like a real upsetting loss for this group of like, we thought we had a chance to win that game, and they're really motivated to do better this next year. You like to hear all that, and you like to be optimistic about that. How does it all come together is kind of the question, but I think you certainly look at what they've been able to do so far, and you kind of look at what maybe could happen down the pike here, and you can get optimistic. Like, this is at least the foundation of a tournament team, back to Matt's point a minute ago, assuming there's development from that young core group of players, which ultimately I think is the bet that they're making is, hey, we're going to kind of around the edges add some star players, some kind of key reserve or key role players that are veterans, but ultimately really want this team to be led by our youth and kind of this young group. And we'll kind of see how that comes together this offseason.
Look, if Tahina is your backup point guard, that means whoever is starting ahead of her is really, really good, because she was honorable mention all WCC this past season at Washington State. She started and appeared in 29 games during her sophomore season in the Pac-12 as her freshman year in 22-23. She was an all-freshman honorable mention player. And then prior to getting to Washington State, she was the youngest player to ever suit up for the Kosovo national women's basketball team. Like, I don't care how small, obscure of a stat that is. Like, that's her entire country. I don't care, like,
what
how historic her program, her country is in international basketball. She's the youngest player to ever suit up for her national team. Like, that carries some significance.
And that national team experience, just another parallel with Mevius, where like there was questions. She'd come from Siena. It was kind of like, how's that translate? It's like, well, no, go what she did. She won an Olympic gold medal playing 3-on-3 basketball for Germany. Like that's a great point. I'm happy you pointed that out. That extends to this player is not just like, okay, she's competitive. She can do a couple of things. That is in her country. She's one of the very best players and has been from 17, 18 years old. So certainly an encouraging piece. And, before we jump over the men's side, I'll just say, like, I hope there's some optimism that this is heading in the right direction from the fan base and that there's support, because I think there was a lot of people kind of fence sitting. I understood it given what happened the year before, but yeah, there's some real momentum in my mind in terms of what they're putting together. And I think this class and retaining all 9 possible players and then adding, quality pieces kind of in short order here is an indication that that the program is at least in a healthy spot at this current moment.
The fact that, to echo you, that the fact that they were able to move so quickly in the portal and add a dominant forward at her level, a starter from a really solid program. Washington State has turned into a solid program, and to get her to be okay with possibly coming off the bench for her final season of college basketball after being basically a 3-year starter, and then going out and nabbing a 5-star that spent most of the year on the bench for the number 1 team in the country, and she's just looking for an opportunity to play. Like, that makes sense for her transfer. Like, that in of itself tells you that this program is relevant again with the better players at least through the portal. And high school recruiting seems to be going well. Now that they've gotten back to the tournament, I'll be curious to see what it does for next November when they announce their signing class for the 2026 group. I imagine they're going to have an opportunity to go out and find some elite talent. So yeah, like, the program is trending back up again, and it didn't look like that was going to happen 13, 14 months ago. It didn't look like it was possible. And here we are, a year later, things have changed. And I think optimism continues to get, higher and higher. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're going to be a Final Four caliber team next season, but I think it's well within Oregon's right to say, like, we should have a good chunk of you back in the stands. We should field an NCAA tournament caliber team, and we should be a team that probably is going to have an opportunity to win a game, maybe more in the tournament, and see how far that goes. So women are trending in the right direction. It's a good sign. It's a positive sign, and we'll continue to see where they go moving forward. Because to your point, they still have scholarships available, and they still have big names coming for official visits later this week and this month into next. Let's shift now to the men's side, and they too have also had one verbal commitment come in since we've done our last podcast, joining Tevin Pryor. TK Simpkins, a CAA all-conference guard out of Elon University that I believe is in North Carolina, I want to say.
Yeah, it is.
He's originally from Brooklyn, went the JUCO route, played a couple years of JUCO ball at a school that Oregon recruited Elgin Cook, Chris Duarte, Michael Chandler. So familiar with that JUCO area. This guy went to Elon and has had 2 really good years, and now for his final season of college basketball. And I'll be curious with this waiver that JUCO guys have. Maybe can he find a way to get 2 years out of it? I don't know that answer. But TK Simpkins, 16 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2.6 assists. That is big news for the Ducks, and this is a good addition because we've done a podcast talking about prior and what was next, and I guess maybe we should pause on Simpkins here. I didn't think this through. Kwame Evans and Jackson Shelstad are both back too.
I was going to say we've got also other really good news, Matt. So
yes, so let's pause Simpkins for a second. That's bad on me. Kwame and Shelstad both back for Oregon, and sometimes it's not who you add, it's who you keep. And for Oregon, if let's just assume for a second here, Biddle's back because I think he's going to have to really outperform his projections to get drafted. If all 3 of those guys come back, which 2 of the 3 have now said they are, that's your big 3. And now it's going to the portal and finding guys like Simpkins who can be your 4th guy or your 5th guy or your 6th man, because Evans, Shelstad, and Biddle, that trio is as good as anyone in the Big Ten. Evan Maya's a data site for college basketball. You know, the best 3-man lineups in the Big Ten this past season with 400 possessions played or more. Nate Biddle, Kwame Evans, Jackson Shelstad. That's a huge return for the Ducks getting these guys back.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, when you told me that stat a couple of days ago, I was like, that adds up. Like I mean, and that's it's great because this Evan Maya site, which is now on both our radars a little bit more, it's a treasure trove of information. And I think we both felt watching the team that like when those 3 guys played, it seemed like a lot of good things happened. And frankly, when Biddle and Shelstad were out there together, good things happened. And
yeah,
but having Kwame out there was such a nice compliment to Nate, I thought, in terms of just rim protection, rebounding, the size to guard multiple positions. And now having those 3 back, and of course we have to note like Biddle could still stay in the NBA draft, but like sure. I think the expectation now is like that there's a very real possibility that happens. That's a really, really high end group that you can build around. And frankly, one where like you figure they just keep getting better. And if that group, like, I don't think you look at any of those 3 guys as finished products. That's why none of them are going to probably be in the NBA draft this year. Like all 3 of them have some kind of room to improve. And like I think all of them have NBA traits. It's just a matter of, do they all develop to the point where they can stay on a team? But like they're back thinking that you're going to get more from them this year than probably last year. And like, I think the growth potential for them is really high. And now it's about, and this is where we get into the TK Simpkins. I almost called him TJ because that's his twin brother, which is who is not going to be at Oregon, but I guess could have been. You feel really good about kind of the baseline and what TK could provide as being maybe your 3rd offensive player, but your 4th overall best player. Maybe he surprises us and he's, one of your top 3 players. But I think you just have to like that you got some really high end NBA caliber talent to build around. And in an era of college basketball where continuity just like doesn't exist, like rolling out arguably your 3 best or at least most high ceiling players consecutive seasons coming off a year where you were really competitive in the Big Ten and won a game and were very close to making it to the second weekend. I think you have to be really encouraged by kind of just like what the baseline is. And now we can get into Simpkins, Matt, and also like what else can happen. But like, I guess I'll just ask you with Simpkins, like, is it assumed he's a starter immediately? You kind of asked me that with Jacobs. Like, is she Oregon's starting power forward? Like, is Simpkins Oregon's starting shooting guard?
Yeah, I think so right now. I think the challenge here is now can you go out and can you find someone that's straight up better or his equal and make your bench better? I think he is going to be projected to be your your starting guard. I think he's also probably going to be the secondary ball handler to Shelstad. Phillips might battle with that role being, Shelstad's backup point guard, but this is a guy that 3 assists a game as a junior or as a sophomore, excuse me, just over 2.5 assists this past season. His turnovers are kind of high, averages over 2 a game, but he also has a far higher usage rate at Elon. I think it was 33% the possessions he was heavily involved in. Oregon's highest was 24, and that was Jackson Shelstead. So his usage will go down, which means his turnovers will go down. But I think he's going to be kind of your Bartholomew type player.
Yeah.
3-point shooter, can defend the ball. He averaged over a steal a game, almost over a steal and a half as a sophomore in 23, 24. I think his shooting percentages are solid. He's a 42% field goal percentage shooter over 2 years. He's a 34% 3-point shooter. He's a 75% free throw shooter. And a lot of that has come when, quite frankly, like, he had full attention of a defense. Like, that will not be the case at Oregon. Teams will focus on stopping Biddle inside, and then a lot of the attention on the perimeter is going to be forcing the ball out of Jackson Shelstead's hands. So he's going to be a catch and shoot player. I think he shot over 40% on threes in the position, and that's probably where a lot of his threes are going to come from at Oregon next season. So this is one of those. How do I use this is like a Moneyball ad for Oregon. Like, Dana finds a guy that's maybe not as prolific as a Josh Dix, which Oregon tried to go out and get. And they were really close to getting him on campus for an official visit out of Iowa. He's like a top 10 portal guy, one of the top players overall, one of the best shooters in the country this past season. But you had to make sure with the resources you had that your top 3 guys were coming back. They've done that. And now they maybe find a guy that's maybe not as big of a sexy name as a Josh Dix, but still fits correctly. And you can still go out and add other pieces. I think this is a real solid addition to the roster, and gives you a backup point guard, gives you another shooter, gives you a guy that's comfortable shooting threes and scoring a lot of baskets. And quite frankly, like, if another big name transfer portal guy that's a guard wants to come to Oregon, he's probably not going to be scared away by TK Simpkins being on the roster. And that's trying not to be a slouch to Simpkins at all. It's just the reality. And they can play together. They can fit together. So, yeah, I think this is a good ad. Now, the next part is, can you go out and find another really good wing that can score, whether it's going downhill in the mid-range, three-pointer, but more importantly, can that guy that you add, can he also be a lockdown defender? Because while I think Simpkins has good traits of a defender, he is far and away not near the athlete or the body type that Bamba was of a defender. He's going to be bigger. He's going to be heavier than Bartholomew, no doubt. That's going to help. But he can't fill the Bamba defensive role, because Bamba, to be honest with you, is like 20 pounds heavier and a little bit taller.
Yeah, Bamba, and then you throw Jadrian Tracy in there, who are your 2 best wing defenders. Like, that to me feels like that's probably the most glaring hole, and that's probably the one thing they really need to fill, right, man? It's just like a big wing defender who can be your best, who can guard maybe 1 through 4 at a high level, 1 through 3 primarily, and then who can fill in some baskets here and there. Like, I think offensively, with what they have now with Shelstad and his shot making, with Biddle and his just versatility to score kind of at all 3 levels, and Kwame's kind of up and down offensively, but Simpkins, I don't know if you need to find an elite offensive player. It feels like you're kind of looking at somebody maybe more for what they do on the other side of the court. We'll also think, you don't recruit anybody who just can't be an offensive factor. Like, no one gets recruited who scores 2 points per game and is as a non-factor on that side, really. But I think the defensive traits is kind of what you're looking for. And to your point, Matt, it does, can you find someone like a TJ Bamba for a year who's a big, bruising, physical, guard, forward defender who, can force some steals, but who more than anything can just kind of make shots difficult. Like, there were some games where I just thought he was positionally in position, made driving lanes difficult, closed out on shooters well, stopped people from getting to their spots and being comfortable. That just kind of feels like what they need. And you look at the roster, Matt, they do have other guards returning, but nobody that really fits that skill set from at least my perspective.
Yeah, that's going to be where it gets interesting. There's plenty of names out there, and that's the thing about the portal. And we talked about this when Devin Pryor committed, that if Devin Pryor was your 4th or your 5th portal ad, everyone's viewpoint of that would be totally different, because he's the flyer piece. He's the guy that's got high potential, low risk. But because he was the first, everyone kind of assumed that's the number one guy. Like he wasn't the top target, and I don't think TK Simpkins is going to be the top target either for this program. And the reason I say that is because what's wild about the college basketball portal is unlike, and I shouldn't say unlike, but even more so than college football is there's always a big name every day being thrown into the college basketball portal. And there's always going to be a big name in terms of a new athlete that enters and what have you. And you go and you look at the list of names that were kind of perceived as the top, I don't know, let's say like 10 or 15, 20 portal players that were available after Monday. And you go and you look at those names and you look at where it's at today, which is almost 2 weeks since the portal is opened. And a lot of those players have pushed down. They're, the big names that everyone was freaking out about is of, oh, these guys are deciding quick and Oregon's not involved and what have you. Like a lot of those guys pushed down. Josh Dix, for instance, I said on this podcast, was like a top 10 portal guy. He was at one point. He's now number 18 because more and more players are adding into the mix, into the portal here. Yeah, granted, a lot of these names in the top 25, 30 have been plucked already and they've already landed at a spot. But my bigger point is I think Oregon has the luxury now because they've gotten Jackson Shellstead back. They've gotten Kwame Evans back. They know that more than likely Nate Biddle's also going to come back to Oregon. Your top three is back. That's kind of what you're banking on. And those three guys, if they were in the portal, they'd all be some of the most sought after transfers in the country. So now it's filling out your roster and finding depth pieces. And sure, as much as you'd like to go and add a top 10 player at the portal position, like let's just throw out a name, a Darian Williams from Texas Tech. Like as much as that makes sense, he's the number 5 player in the portal. Like you've already, that guy's going to command so much money and every school wants him. And on top of that, there's only a handful of programs that can afford to spend $2 or $3 million on all 5 of their starters. And that's what he's going to command. And Oregon's decided, hey, if we're going to spend a lot of our resources from an NIL perspective, we want to make sure the guys that are already in the system that are probably, quite frankly, better players are staying here. And that's what they've done. And now it's, can you go out and be selective and find the players that best fit the group of a core that you have back? You got an elite big man. You got a really promising power forward. You've got an elite point guard. And then you've got a couple guys off the bench, and Des Lindsey, who's a JUCO All-American, redshirted this past season. And then you've got a Jamari Phillips, who was a top, I think, 150 recruit, a 4-star prospect that's got a lot of potential. Can you find other pieces that fit around your big three and fit around the group that you're bringing back? And so far, they've done that. They've added a really athletic wing and Devin Pryor that's got high upside and brings intangibles that, quite frankly, some of the guys on the bench last year couldn't do. And now you've added a scorer, a guy that's produced at a high level at the college level already. And now you're going to kind of mix and match and find a couple more pieces here. Power forward seems like a backup position there that you need to add. You already mentioned the wing defender. That probably needs 2 players. Mm-hmm. And then you need to find a backup center. And that might be Paul Mbaya, the freshman from France, who hasn't made a decision yet. And I think is just kind of waiting on Oregon to decide what they want to do. But yeah, like, do they have a bunch of commits? No. Do they have a bunch of high-profile guys? No. But their high-profile guys are the returners, and now it's filling in the depth pieces, and that's where they're at right now.
And just to put – I was just looking this up as you were talking there, Matt. To put it into context, like Brandon Angel and TJ Bamba started basically every game last year. TJ Bamba committed May 2nd, and I think Brandon Angel, I just looked up, April 23rd. Like, we're 2, 3, 4 weeks out from where Oregon was kind of filling in its holes last year. Just because the portal's been ongoing for a while doesn't mean oh no, Oregon hasn't got its guys. There's not going to be anybody out there. The team's, I guess, build is not determined on April 11th or April 12th or middle of April. You need, you've had more time allotted to you. And to your point, Matt, and you'll have, I'm sure, more updates as we go through here with new names as they emerge. There's going to be plenty of impact players, and Oregon's in a really nice spot where it's kind of the opposite of where the women had been, and I think kind of still are, of they needed to go out and find those kind of an alpha player or two just to kind of lead this team. Oregon returns too with Shellstad and Biddle. Those were your alpha players. They're both back. It's kind of a different build where now it's about kind of filling in the spots here. Do they need a really high-end wing defender, who's maybe somebody who's been an all-conference player at a lesser level? Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then I think they can probably go find one of those guys, but they're not searching for guys necessarily who are top 10 portal players either. Maybe they could get one, but that doesn't have to be the driving force given what they already have coming back.
Yeah, we'll be curious to see where they move. I still haven't locked it down yet. I anticipate I won't be shocked to learn that Oregon brings in a guy or two for official visits this weekend or early into next week, or quite frankly, both. But nonetheless, we're tracking the names. We're tracking the targets that make sense. If we get in, we'll post it up on duckterritory.com. But for now, it's a podcast where we're talking about multiple verbal commitments for both programs. I think things are going in the right direction. And now it's just, where do the pieces continue to lead us? And that's where we're trying to figure out.
It sure is.
All right. Until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Thanks for watching.
Talk to you later, folks.